Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to our webinar. So I suppose first things first, webinar today, we're going to look at how network security has changed through COVID-19 and how our users are connecting differently now, how the workplaces in general have changed. And is it time that we start to rethink our network structures? And when we look at remote users, is VPN still the best solution for our remote users? So before we get into the nitty gritty, I suppose just introducing ourselves, it's myself, Ant Robinson. I'm the sales engineering and implementations team lead here at iBoss. And I'm also joined by my colleague, Chris Page, who's the channel technical manager. And we'll both be going through the content today and giving you an idea of what, of that rethink to the network. So I suppose I'll pass over to Chris and he'll just give you a bit of background about iBoss in general and just a bit of a company overview.
Okay, thanks very much, Ant. So, starting with the platform. Now, first of all, when you look at this slide, it looks very busy, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and simplify it and just pull out the key points. So, starting with the platform on the top left-hand side. Now, our technology is based on over 200 patents. So we have patents which are issued to us and pending to us as well, which cover various technologies relating to our platform, which ultimately make it unique to the market. And many of these patents relate to the containerized architecture, which we're going to be covering in later slides. In terms of the awards, industry recognition, we've been in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for several years. We're a visionary, and we've also received various awards. If you are linked into us, well, if you're connected to us on LinkedIn, you would have seen that. So they seem to be coming thick and fast at the moment. And in terms of the, hold on 1 second. So in terms of the fast connectivity and modern security, our approach ensures users are connected instantly to our cloud service. So as soon as they have a network connection, whatever the device that they are using or wherever they are in the world, as soon as they turn on that device, the user is connected to our platform. So fast connectivity as soon as the device is turned on, and modern security in terms of our SASE approach and what we can actually do around removing or moving on-premise security architecture to the cloud. Moving to the top right, so the infrastructure and security. On a daily basis, we see over 150 billion transactions on our platform. And in terms of malware, we block over 4 billion threats a day. And in terms of malware, we do things a little bit differently at iBoss because we don't rely on one or two technologies to do malware and malware inspection. We use an entire multitude of technologies. So we bolt all these together to give you a defense in-depth approach. So it's not just pattern matching, it's not just reputation. We go way beyond that because you need that with a secure or SASE-based security service. In terms of our presence, so we have options for, well, we have a global presence, but we also have the options to have an on-premise presence as well. So globally, we have over 100 points of presence. So this gives fast and secure connections from anywhere. So giving network security as close to the user as possible. So in country, they connect up to the POP, which is in their country. And as I already said, we also have the option for hybrid environments as well. So if customers in certain instances for compliance reasons or whatever their requirements may be, they can have an instance on premise, which again, they can link to the cloud as well. So we're very flexible in terms of our infrastructure and scalability. In terms of our customers, I'm not going to reel off all of these, but we have over 4,000 global customers. And because of the nature of our platform and our ability to be flexible and to scale incredibly quickly, you'll see here we've got one customer that's got over 100,000 devices on a global basis. So we can scale to the multinationals, the global corporations, in order to protect them, as well as the small to medium enterprises and large in-country customers as well. And also in terms of our verticals, we cover every single vertical. So as you can see here, financial services, oil and gas, military, automation, manufacturing. In the US, we are in with one of the top 3 in all of those different areas there. So we do have the large customer base. So again, we can go from the small, medium, up to the big globals. Moving on to the bottom right, business impact. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these figures here because that would just be daft, but iBoss can offer significant benefits and return on investment to customers. And there are numerous different ways of looking at this. So first of all, you can phase out your old on-premise hardware, your VPNs, your web gateways, your intrusion detection, intrusion prevention devices, etc. Ultimately saving hardware costs, maintenance costs and contracts, HVAC, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning, power, space, all of these costs which add up. You can start to remove all of those different layers of that technology and the associated costs. And you can also move single security network products to a single platform. We'll come on to that in the center of the diagram in a moment, bringing further cost savings. So you're reducing your architecture, you're reducing your deployment and reducing your ongoing management. And we can actually give you the single pane of glass to manage the platform as well. So we're bringing together, as you'll see later, multiple elements of security and networking into one place. Now going over to the middle of the diagram, I'm going to start at the top. So the iBoss SASE, or Secure Access Service Edge Cloud Security Platform. We can deliver multiple things to you in terms of customers, in terms of security, networking, benefits, cost savings, etc., etc. And to start off with at the top, we can securely connect you to any cloud or SaaS application via our platform. And on top of that, we can add whatever access and security controls you want, which takes us to the second wheel where we see the CASB, DLP, intrusion detection. We can put whatever security wrapper or wrappers around your users and groups and the apps that they are accessing to whatever your requirements may be. We can provide connection from any device, any location. So enterprise and independent users as well. So whether it's Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, Chromebook, we can cover them all. So whether they are workers within an organization, they're contractors, students at a university, etc., we can cover them. And also the platform itself is available across multiple platforms. So I've mentioned the fact that we have our own architecture. I've mentioned the fact that we can give you a physical appliance if you want to have a hybrid configuration, etc. But we can also bolt onto other cloud providers such as Azure and AWS, giving you further options. So that's the architecture and who we are and what we do in less than 10,000 words. So I'm going to pass it over to Ant, and he's going to take you through rethinking the network.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. So, yeah, as we come to look at the network as a whole, and actually at the challenges that a lot of organizations are facing at the moment, we can see a few differences actually in terms of where we've come from to where we need to get to. So, looking at a whole, when we look at what a lot of customers have currently, this idea of four walls architecture, where you have your security stack, it sits on premise, you're protecting your users because they come into the office. Now, obviously, that's changed through COVID. We've seen users work from home, users being more remote. But that wasn't always it isn't just COVID that's caused this. It really accelerated and been the catalyst to what we've seen a lot of organizations moving towards with cloud strategy. But when we see a lot of organizations' cloud strategy, they're very focused on parts like Office 365 and moving their applications to the cloud, but security isn't always at the forefront of their minds. And because of that, it leads to some challenges for the end user. So if we look here, we've got those users that have now gone remote. So whether that be through COVID or cloud first strategy or flexible working, they're now on the road working from home. But with this idea of having the security stack on premise within the data center, we're boomeranging that traffic straight back through the data center to go out to these cloud services where they've moved to your cloud strategy. That leads to some issues from the end user's point of view. So slow and strained connections, that they're not getting the performance they want to see through the security stack for all their connectivity. But also moving more applications to the cloud, we're seeing more and more bandwidth go there. So users working remote, there's more readily available bandwidth. But there's also more encrypted traffic as more and more of the web starts to become HTTPS. So I think it was a Google transparency report recently suggested it's over 90% HTTPS traffic in the web now. It's a vast amount of traffic that we need to inspect. And doing that on-prem becomes more and more difficult. More and more appliances, more and more boxes you need to stack to achieve that goal of having that visibility of the traffic. And that obviously leads to expense, difficulty, hard to manage. It is all round bad from the end user's point of view for speed and latency reasons, but also from the IT point of view of it's very difficult to manage, very hard to maintain. So that's where this shift comes in and where we sit in the cloud of moving that security to the cloud gives you that ability to secure those devices from wherever and gives you the scalability you need. So as you grow or there's more encrypted traffic or more bandwidth in use, the cloud service is there to soak that up and support you as you grow and expand. So obviously we've seen this solution, we've seen how we where we sit, but there's a few other ways that organizations have looked at doing this. And I suppose the first step, which a lot of organizations took at the beginning of COVID, was a full VPN. So looking at protecting those devices by sending all traffic back through the data center through your existing security stack. That works in principle, but again, leads to those slow and strained connections. You have VPN concentrators on site, they're expensive, they don't give the best performance because they're overloaded, because there's more users going through it than anticipated, meaning there's high costs to maintain because you have to maintain those VPN concentrators, buying more and more appliances, say, to support that. And it's really an old school way of thinking in that we have that legacy architecture on site and we're trying to make it work for our remote users. Some organizations have gone a different route into a split tunnel. So sending some traffic that needs to go back to the data center over that VPN, meaning the VPN can cope and it works well, and sending the rest of the traffic just out direct through the user's internet connection. Obviously, that's good for the end user. The end user gets a really good experience going out to the internet, but they're not protected in any way, and you've got no visibility of that traffic. So there's no policy being applied to that traffic as it's going out to the internet and out to wherever it needs to go. Obviously, that's a very dangerous route. It's just exposing you to more and more risk and more ability for users to get to cloud apps they shouldn't be able to go to, or go to malware destinations, those kind of things, and with no oversight from the organization as a whole. So the final way is cloud. And we've seen a big shift into cloud now. Obviously, this is where our market is and where we sit. But a lot of organizations are moving towards this cloud architecture, but it depends on the cloud architecture itself to what value you're going to get out of it. So the different vendors will see cloud in different ways. So one of the ways, obviously, cloud will be resolving some of those issues we've spoken about. So it's resolving the issue for the VPN. You're not sending all the traffic back to the VPN to go into the network. So you are offloading a lot of work for those VPN appliances, reducing cost, and you're maintaining that speed for the end user because it's going through that cloud service. But we always say, is it true cloud? How is that solution architected to where is it maintained? Where is it stored? Is it on public cloud or private cloud? Are there any caveats with it? Is it a on-premise solution with a cloud extension? And when we talk about things like that, you start to see issues with feature parity and slowness or different features in the cloud. And it becomes quite complicated to manage. So one of the things that we always talk around is making sure that it's a single unified platform, and just understanding that all clouds aren't equal, that these approaches can have some real reward, and the cloud obviously can have some real benefits, but making sure you choose the right cloud for your infrastructure. So this really links into this idea of time to think cloud. So when we're looking at these cloud architectures and infrastructures, there's two real main concerns that we have to look at. One of which being security. So is there a full security stack there? Has it got all the features you want from your on-premise security, or what you've got in your on-premise security stack in the cloud? But also connectivity. Is it fast? Is it reliable? Is it in the data centers you want it to be in? So is it local to your organization? Do you have in-country data centers? And can it support connections into your internal network? Can it do things like zero trust network access and replace the VPN? Or is it primarily looking at that security focus and just looking at web traffic? So there's quite a lot of things to consider. So looking at the security side, obviously that full security stack is key for the security side. So making sure it has things like secure web gateway functionality. So able to apply the policies you'd expect it to apply to those users. Does it have malware defense? And leading on from what Chris said earlier, does it have a full suite of malware defensive features, or is it very basic malware defense? Are they pulling from multiple feeds or one single vendor's feeds? Giving you an idea of what kind of efficacy you're going to get out of that malware engine. Also having features like CASB, understanding what your users are doing on the web. Are they going to other file sharing applications? And actually having the ability to start to control that application data as well. So if it's users going out to Dropbox, for example, do we want them to be able to upload files, or do we want it to be read-only? All of these kind of considerations we need to think about of that security stack. The next one is single platform. So we do see this a lot in the market, and it's something that we're very wary of telling customers around. Of SASE is a really big word at the moment. Lots of vendors are talking around the SASE model, but it's making sure the SASE model actually fits to what we expect. So the SASE model could be, or a lot of vendors will talk around the SASE model of being lots of different products glued together into a solution. That doesn't give the best experience for management. If you've got lots of different products you're going to have to manage and maintain, maybe there's lots of different ways you have to link them up. Are they via API, or is it one unified platform to manage? Do you have to install different connectors on the endpoints? So there's lots of software to manage. It can start to become tricky and not a cohesive single platform. But also full coverage and same experience. So making sure that the solution that we have for our remote users is the same solution for that we have for our on-premise users. So the users that are coming into the office get exactly the same experience as when they're on the road. So there's no difference in technology and feature set in security for those users. They're always getting applied the same level of security. And when we move to the connectivity side, we start to look at how the network works as a whole. So where we've got these remote users and even users inside the network, how are we giving access to those apps? So we have legacy apps inside the organization we still need to access. They might now be in Azure, or they might be still in our data centers, but we still need to give access to those regardless of that user's location. So private access, or ZTNA, zero trust network access, is key. So we don't have to have that legacy VPN architecture. Gives us more flexibility on our cloud journey as well, of moving things into Azure, say, or AWS, as the SASE platform can broker those connections in, meaning we don't have to rely on those VPNs anymore. But also that lets us simplify the network. We don't have, again, to have complicated network structures where we have users coming in over VPNs and segregated networks, because we have the ability to, by policy, say who can reach what, all from the cloud. We don't have to worry about those architectures. And that same key point again of fast connections, making sure that the solution can handle those connections and you get fast access to those apps internally that we need to. So one of the things I wanted to highlight really was cloud hesitancy, of why certain customers, or why you might be worried about moving to the cloud. And we hear quite a lot of these from our customers in terms of things like control. So who has control over the policy? Who has control over what users can reach and can't reach? So want to make sure that any platform you look at or move to gives you full control. You still have the same features and same parity you had with your on-premise solution, as well as how fast will the policy change. With big multi-tenant solutions, sometimes this can take longer. Is it going to be an instant change? Is it going to be 5 minutes? Is it going to be 30 minutes, 2 hours? Just need to make sure that we understand how long those changes are going to make. Also, uptime and resiliency. So do we have an SLA for latency, for example, to make sure the service is usable for our end users? But also, do we have redundancy built into the platform? So we might have data centers built on public cloud, say. So it might be in Google or AWS. But if anything happens to an AWS data center, say, or a customer's third-party data center, how is the redundancy model built into the platform? So is there the ability to fail over to other data centers? As we spoke about before, feature parity with existing solutions. So making sure that as we're moving from our on-premise security stack to cloud, are we getting exactly the same features? We're not losing out on anything that we used to have on-premise, and we're not losing any visibility or security for our end users' devices. And can it work in both scenarios? So is it going to be the same platform you're going to use for your on-premise security as well as your off-premise security? Makes life simple, makes it easy to manage if it's all the same platform, all managed in the same place. One of the key things we see is product maturity. And we see this quite a lot from customers starting to move to cloud. And depending on the vendors they can see wildly different platforms to how long they've been around and how long they've been in the cloud. So can it do everything your existing gateways can do? Is there anything missing? And also, is it a brand new product? Is there going to be teething issues, or are they quite established in the market? A disparate platform is another part, which when we look at product maturity comes in the same sort of hand in hand, where we're looking at, is it a suite of products or is it one platform? So is it multiple things glued together, bundled up, and then given sort of the SASE stamp by marketing? Or is it actually a single platform that has all these features you want built in and integrated, and it's just one single solution, one single product? And the last point I always like to point out is troubleshooting. So when we look at the solution as a whole, when your first line or your support guys are working on the solution and trying to look at things for end users, how easy is it going to be for that IT support analyst to troubleshoot? Are they going to have to raise support tickets with a vendor to try and understand what's happening, which we see in quite a lot of these solutions? Or are the tools available to that end user like they would be for an on-premise solution? Can they do packet captures, for example, is a big one. For a lot of services, you have to raise support tickets, but with a plug for us with iBoss, you don't. It's all built into the platform. So having the ability to still have the visibility you had with your on-premise in the same way of your off-premise solution or your new cloud solution is really key in essentially ensuring the workflows remain the same. So when we look at actually, passing over to Chris for this, of talking around the route to cloud and how we migrate users and what to look for in those SASE services.
Thanks, Anne. There's one point just back to the last slide that popped into my head, and that's around the shared responsibility model. So when customers move to SaaS, PaaS and IaaS services, there's a shared responsibility model, which as a customer, you have there's certain layers of security that you have to provide going into the services. So that's another element that you need to think about, but it's kind of like it flips the cloud hesitancy bit, because there's lots of people using those kind of cloud services, but then security is an afterthought, which happens all too often. But yes, so anyway, moving on. So route to cloud. So in this day and age, we have to be able to support users. So no matter where the user is, where they're working from, location, time of day, whatever. And the global pandemic has helped prove this point, that we need to be able to support these users no matter where they are and what they're doing. And with that, we need to take a cloud-first approach with security. When you look at all of the other elements of our day-to-day lives, whether it's working, whether it's our personal lives, we've adopted the cloud. So Office 365, Dropbox, Salesforce, loads of people use that at work. But when you're at home, Spotify, Netflix, Disney Plus, these are all great examples, but they're examples of moving to the cloud and just using it and embracing it. So a cloud-first approach is there. So security should be absolutely no different. So a cloud-first approach should be taken. And as Ant has already mentioned, we should no longer have to rely on the legacy security architectures, the VPNs, the products to protect these workers because they are old hat. That basically they are obsolete. And again, to draw on a point that Ant said, we have to be able to provide the same level of protection for the users no matter where they are. So despite the fact we're going to move into the cloud, we have to protect them in exactly the same way or better. And this is where SASE comes in, or Secure Access Service Edge. And this approach brings around a convergence of networking and security technologies into a single platform. And gone are the days where you have to look at multiple vendors. You have to look at which one is the best of breed, which one can perform this specific function. Because not only was that methodology complex, expensive to buy, expensive to manage, expensive to maintain, it's obsolete. And SASE is, Secure Access Service Edge, is the way forward. And to recap on the point, it brings about the convergence of the networking and security technologies into the single platform. So this diagram here, I call it the SASE wheel. Some people call it the SASE donut. It's a personal thing. But as you can see here, we've got networking capabilities in blue and we've got security capabilities in green. And we've got SASE right in the middle where the convergence happens. And the idea around this is a SASE platform will give you as many of these functions and deliver them as a single platform. And that's one of the key terms, as a single platform, because when you look at SASE architecture, there can be, and again, as I mentioned earlier, there's different approaches. So there could be different products being bolted on. There could be different architectures here, there, data stored in different places, this, that, and the other. So you need to think about it being a single platform. And this is where iBoss is ahead of the curve in a couple of places. So firstly, on this diagram here, you'll see in the square box, these are iBoss's capabilities within the SASE architecture. So we cover the vast majority of the capabilities of the SASE wheel. And at the bottom, there's a few components which aren't included, but you'll see remote browser isolation, reverse proxy. We're working on those. And the aim is to bring them into our platform very soon. And the great thing about that is we developed it in-house. We've not gone for a third-party relationship. We've not acquired someone. We are building it in-house. So if we can have that capability, we will bring it to you. And when you actually look at the SASE methodology, and Gartner released this this term 2 or 3 years ago, one of the fun things was the iBoss architecture was designed this way before the SASE model came out. So we are already on the front foot in terms of our capabilities, our platform, and what we can bring to customers and to the channel in terms of a SASE platform. Excuse me. And another thing that you need to think about is it's very difficult for a single vendor to cover all of the SASE capabilities on their own. We're very fortunate we were ahead of the curve with our architecture, the patents that we had in place, etc., etc. But we can't do everything. And we'll openly admit to we can't do everything. And there's never going to be a silver bullet when it comes to IT security, SASE, secure access, service edge, etc., because it's just not possible. But we can provide a very good platform to build security and networking on top of that, if you should choose to do so. So in terms of this architecture, it is delivered as a service. So it is security as a service. So going back to the point on the previous slide, security should be cloud first, along with everything else that we use in this day and age. So it is security as a service. It is a full software stack delivered in the cloud. We've got one single multi-tenant cloud platform, so we don't bolt disparate products together. And we've got the capability of building or scaling horizontally and automatically. So what I mentioned earlier in the first slide, we've got customers that are multinationals, globals. We've got one customer with 100,000 plus endpoints. We can scale to those kind of customers, and the capabilities are the same. So whether you are a 500 or 1,000 user, doesn't matter. You'll have exactly the same capabilities as if you are a 100,000 global multinational. But another thing to think about is when you look at SASE as an architecture, there are certain things that you need to look for in the vendors that you're looking at, because SASE has become one of those great marketing terms that everybody is using. And going back to the point, when I first looked at SASE, I thought this is a great idea, but how are vendors going to implement it? Because every vendor has a different implementation. But when you actually look at setting the scene, the world of technology has completely changed over the past few years. So I've already mentioned the pandemic, but when we look at the way we work, smartphones and smart devices, they've allowed users to work from virtually anywhere. The applications that were hosted on your data centers and your server rooms are now in the cloud. And the combination of the two, so the combination of mobility and cloud applications, has driven agility and allowed people and individuals and companies to become more productive. And there's also knock-on effects such as bandwidth. So bandwidth is through the roof, and encrypted network connections, that they're becoming mandatory. So there are lots of things to think about when you are looking at a SASE vendor. But in short, the world has changed. The old architecture that we've put at the core of our operations for so long is obsolete. And all the protection products that we've implemented and managed for all these years can no longer do the job. There has been a shift, and we need to be able to shift to the cloud as well. And I suppose some people will see SASE as hype, but when you actually look through it and read through it in detail, it's not. It makes absolute sense, because it's all about the convergence. So the convergence of networking and the security side of things. So as you can see in the middle of there, IBOS, Secure Access Service Edge. That is exactly what we've done. But there are also some key things that you need to consider. And no matter what the product, who the vendor that you're looking at, these are the kind of things you need to think about. So, a list of things to check for a SASE product and a SASE vendor. And you need to think about things such as the security architectures. So can they actually address modern dynamic access requirements, for example? What are the kind of pitfalls? So I've already kind of alluded to the marketing side of things, but when you're looking at a SASE solution, look under the bonnet and read in detail what you're actually looking at, what you're potentially getting from your vendor of choice. Do they have a dedicated environment? Do they have a global presence? How easily does the platform scale? Where is your data kept, etc., etc.? So there's lots of different things that you need to think about, but also the ultimate question that it always comes down to is price. And there's, how much is this actually going to cost? Because there's so many potential elements to a SASE solution, you need to go in it with your eyes wide open. And that's another thing that we're trying to do at iBoss, is make things such as our architecture, our pricing, as simple as possible. Excuse me, I'm just going to grab a quick drink of water, sorry. So, moving on from there, when you look at the core components of a SASE architecture, we've got 6 listed here. There are others, but these are the kind of core components that you would see in an organization that would want to move first. So the secure web gateway, CASB, malware defense, there'll be some kind of common order that we would have when an organization would like to move their security to the cloud. So starting off with the secure web gateway, can we move that to the cloud, and can we actually do decryption at scale? I myself have had a long checkered history with secure web gateways, and I remember the days where you had to buy very expensive additional appliance to do decryption. So how do you handle that with your cloud solution? What about CASB? So how does CASB integrate into the platform? How do you start to understand things such as shadow IT? How do you understand the threats around this shadow IT and what they actually bring? So are people using risky sites? Are people putting, excuse me, are people putting data up into the cloud where they shouldn't? Are they using corporate sanctioned or unsanctioned applications? You need to have vision into that. In terms of malware defense, and I've touched on this earlier, you've got to be able to provide multiple layers of malware defense. And again, my history in IT security, you would have one product, and typically you would have one antivirus or anti-malware engine. The iBoss platform uses multiple engines and techniques. So we can wrap it around all the different security capabilities as well. So web filtering, intrusion detection, CASB, etc., etc. We can layer that multiple layer malware defense on top of that. And you need to think about DLP. So we have endpoint DLP, we have network DLP. So as soon as you've turned your device on and you've got that network connection, what are you going to do about that connection and protecting it from a DLP point of view? How are you going to protect your sensitive data? And how are you going to wrap it around things such as CASB, the cloud services that you're accessing, etc., etc.? How are you going to bring about private access or zero trust network access? So how are you going to secure the user connections to the dedicated services? How are you actually going to take the approach of everybody's untrusted until you've proven essentially you are? And again, that brings around zero trust as well. So all of these elements, they will be on a common checklist in terms of any organization wanting to move to the cloud. And can I have the next slide, please? Okay, fantastic. So in terms of our platform, and this slide, Zero Trust by Design, what we've actually done with our platform is we've designed it completely differently, and it's completely unique to the market. So if you look at the left-hand side of this diagram, we have the iBoss architecture. Now, when we provide a gateway or gateways, depending on how large an organization you are and what your requirements are, we give you a dedicated IP address for that gateway. Now, drawing a parallel to others, so we're not going to name names or anything like that, but other solutions don't give you the dedicated IP address, and they will give you a range of IP addresses. So when you actually go and configure your cloud services, you will not be pointing your cloud services, such as Office 365, to a single IP address. You'll be pointing it to a range of IP addresses. And there can be problems with that. But first of all, if you look at the benefit of doing it the iBoss way, we can allow the public cloud applications to become private. So we can lock down the enterprise cloud applications of your choice to the IP address of an iBoss gateway, or iBoss gateways, again, depending on how many you've purchased or invested in. On the flip side, if you have a different architecture, you would have an IP address range, and that could then move on to the second point of blacklisting, because you can increase your risk of blacklisting. And an additional problem with that is, with those platforms that have shared architecture and shared IP addresses, the behavior of somebody else or other organizations can influence what happens around whitelisting and blacklisting of IP addresses. So somebody else could influence what happens with your platform. And another massive benefit to iBoss is what you actually buy is yours. It's absolutely dedicated to you. And if you reach the point, let's say that there was, in 18 months' time, there was another global pandemic, and you have 5,000 users, 4,500 of which have to work from home, we can then use that dedicated resource for you, but also if you need to expand it and add another gateway perhaps, that again will be dedicated to you. Whereas the other model, you are basically sharing it with everybody else who's suffered from the same pandemic, everyone's had to work from home, etc., etc. So it's a dedicated resource for you. Nobody else is going to gain access to it. Nobody else is sharing your data, the data plane, or anything. So it is 100% yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. So I suppose rounding up, I'm really looking at the last points that we want to go through is essentially choosing the right platform, of taking everything we've spoken about today, whether it's iBoss or whether it's another vendor, just looking at what to think about when looking at SASE platforms, when looking at network architecture in general. Of first off, as we spoke about before, infrastructure, whether it's private or public. Do we have, is it based on Azure, AWS? Is it based on their own data centers? So knowing where that architecture is and where that infrastructure is gives you a better idea of, does it meet your requirements in terms of locations? Is there POPs in country? Are you having to travel across borders? Is there any blind spots that you don't have, or any gaps around the world that you don't have? So just making sure the architecture or the infrastructure, fits to where you need that to be. Platform versus product suite as well. So everything we spoke about today, is it one platform unified? Is it one sort of product that you're purchasing and everything's integrated in one way? Or is it a suite of products that are going to be managed through some sort of API, but they're all individual products you're going to have to manage and in some cases purchase separately to get your full security, your full stack in the SASE model? And then also the architecture. What does the architecture actually look like? So although infrastructure wise, you may know it's based on private cloud, it's based in the vendor's own data centers, but is it a shared data plane? Is it mixed data, or is it segregated? Is the solution black box or open? Can you see where your data is going in terms of data center? Is it quite a black box solution that you don't know where data goes in general? It just goes to the service. Also, making sure that you can have things like private everything. So tailing back to what we were talking about around private or around dedicated IP addressing, that can you start to make your cloud services as you migrate into them private? Can you start to tailor them down to, this is my cloud IPs, these are my iBoss IPs that I'm coming through, I'm going to lock down that only users can log in through these. And meeting you on your cloud journey. So although very good everything being in the cloud, but if you've got any situations where you still require that on-premise gateway for legacy applications, or you're still doing you're still doing like explicit proxy for certain users or certain devices, having a solution that's flexible enough that it can still support that and have a hybrid model, say, of on-premise gateways, or still support them in the cloud, is critical. Just making sure it can hit you along that journey. So we spoke a lot about the iBoss architecture in general, so I won't go into too much detail, but if you want to have a bit more of an in-depth run through of the iBoss side, then let us know. We can definitely go through that. But from a high level of what we do is essentially to accomplish everything that we've been talking about today, all the challenges that we see in the industry around other vendors and around cloud solutions, is to protect any device from any location. So whether that's desktop, laptop, mobile devices, we have connectors for all of these. And going through to that full network security architecture. So making sure we can do everything you'd expect, like proxy, DLP, but also the more advanced things like IPS in the cloud and packet captures for your first line guys for troubleshooting, making sure you've still got everything that you're used to with your on-premise solution still in the cloud. But the way we do it is all through containerization. So you as a customer get your own dedicated capacity. So you would see that you've got gateways within particular data centers. So if you need data to remain all within country, say, we can support that. You can see exactly where your data is going to remain. You can set geographic rules for that as well. And the same if you're multinational and you've got you need data centers across the globe, but need to manage where data flows to. We can support you in that all through the platform. And that includes things like the dedicated IPs. So you still maintain that internet identity. So you can do things like locking down public cloud resources. And then finally, out to the open internet. So going into those cloud services, making sure that users at the end of the day have a secure but fast internet access or access to private resources to your applications in your data centers. So I suppose we'll pause there just to go for any questions you guys might have. I see there's a couple in the chat, but if there's any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat.